The Turners came to the children's home, asking if Sophia Miller would be willing to enter the adoption matching program. She stood there in a white dress, chin lifted with quiet pride. "Mrs. Turner, I don't want to be adopted by rich people. If family and money are tied together, that kind of affection can never be pure." A ripple of admiration swept through the activity room. Everyone said Sophia was clear-headed, noble, a girl of real backbone, but the expectation in Elizabeth Turner's eyes dimmed. Little by little, she respected Sophia's choice, and she and her husband Richard prepared to leave. In my last life, this was the exact moment I lowered my head. Sophia had warned me long before. The Turners only wanted to adopt her. If I dared to speak up, would only make a fool of myself. I believed her. 3 days later, she went back to the director of the children's home, crying, saying she had only been afraid of being abandoned. She hadn't truly meant to refuse. 6 months later, she became the Turner family's only daughter. The Turners doted on her. 8 older brothers spoiled her like a princess. She was enrolled in the best private high school in Chicago, given her own education fund, and on her 18th birthday, she received an apartment, and I stayed at the children's home, writing her application essays, organizing her competition materials, until she framed me as a thief. I lost my college scholarship. I lost my place in the transitional apartment. At 21, on a night of blinding snow, I finished my second shift and rode my bike home. Sophia, drunk, slammed into me with her car. Before fleeing the scene, she reversed over my phone, crushing it to pieces. I lay on the frozen pavement, watching her taillights vanish into the storm. It wasn't until Ethan, the eldest Turner son, tracked down the dashcam footage that everyone finally saw what the sister they held in their palms truly was. But by then, I was already dead. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in this moment, the moment the Turners were about to leave. This time, I did not stay silent. I stood up from the corner and raised my hand. "Mrs. Turner, if it's possible, I would like to be evaluated. I want a home." The activity room went dead quiet. Every eye landed on me. Sophia's expression, that carefully crafted look of someone who could not be bought, almost cracked. "Lucy, what's wrong with you?" She walked over to me, gently tugging at my sleeve, her voice soft, like she was coaxing a child who didn't know any better. "I always thought you weren't the kind of person who cared about money and status." Margaret Howard, the director of the children's home, looked uncomfortable too. "Lucy, don't be impulsive. The Turners are here today to confirm Sophia's wishes, not to pick a child on the spot." Of course I knew that. America's adoption process doesn't work because some wealthy family suddenly takes a liking to someone and walks out with a child that same day. Home studies, background checks, child assessments, transition visits, court hearings, every single step required. A 15-year-old also has to give clear consent. I raised my hand for one reason only, to let them know I was willing to enter the formal matching process. Elizabeth stopped mid-step and turned to look at me. "You're Lucy Bennett, right?" "Yes." "Why do you want to be adopted?" Sophia let out a sigh before I could answer. "Lucy has always wanted to leave this place. She just heard the Turner family is wealthy, so she suddenly spoke up." "Don't blame her. She doesn't mean any harm." A few of the other kids started whispering. "Sophia already said no, and she's still throwing herself at them. She's obviously after the Turner money. She usually just keeps her nose in books, but look at her now, grabbing for an opportunity." In my last life, those words would have been enough to make me hang my head in shame. Now, I only looked at Elizabeth. "I do want to leave this place, and I know the Turners can give me a better education. I don't think admitting that is shameful. I want to keep studying. I want to go to university. I also want someone to ask me if it hurts when I'm sick." I paused. "I want to know what it feels like to come home." Elizabeth's eyes went red in an instant. In my last life, after Sophia was adopted, she mocked Elizabeth to my face, calling her ridiculously sentimental. She told me the Turners hadn't chosen to adopt an older girl to have a pretty social ornament. It was because, after their 8 sons had grown up, Elizabeth still believed she had room in her heart to give another child a stable home. The one thing they despised most was people who deliberately set love against material wealth and then used their purity to control others. I knew I had spoken the truth they most wanted to hear. Elizabeth didn't promise anything on the spot. She simply walked over to me and gently took my hand. "Thank you for telling me that." Richard nodded as well. "We'll speak with the Child Welfare Agency. If the social worker thinks it's appropriate, we'd like to get to know you better." That was the proper, formal answer. After they left, everyone immediately crowded around Sophia to comfort her. They were just thrown off by Lucy suddenly raising her hand. "They'll still pick you in the end. You're so outstanding. How could the Turners ever look at her? Sophia shook her head gently. Her eyes rimmed with red. I'm not upset, I'm just worried Lucy's expectations are too high. In the end, she'll only be pitiful. She looked up at me, and in her eyes was a warning only I could read. In my last life, that look had caged me for far too long. This life, I smiled back at her. We'll see who ends up pitiful, too. The next morning, everyone in the dining hall was talking about the Turner family. Sophia was still the goddess who couldn't be moved by money, and I was the gold-digging girl who dreamed of climbing into high society. Someone deliberately raised their voice. Some people raise their hand once and suddenly think they're moving into a lakeside mansion. The Turner family's 8 sons are all elites. Why would they ever want a bookish girl who only knows how to study? When she gets rejected, make sure she doesn't hide somewhere and cry. I walked past them carrying my breakfast tray, not breaking stride. At noon, Sophia sat down across from me, uninvited. Lucy, they're just blunt. Don't take it to heart. You keep thinking that studying yourself to death can change your fate, but some thresholds can't be crossed with effort alone. She glanced at my math workbook, her tone dripping with pity. The Turners want a girl with poise, someone who can glide through high society. You're too direct, and honestly, too dull. If they come back to me, I might give them a chance, and when that happens, don't be upset. I can ask Mrs. Turner to keep funding your education. I didn't answer, I just lowered my head and wrote out the final answer in my workbook. Last life, she said the exact same thing. After she entered the Turner family, she did fund me, in her own name, but that money came from an education trust Elizabeth had set up. Sophia doled out only a fraction to me, and in exchange, she made me write her essays, complete her projects, and organize her application materials. She even had a photographer capture her embracing me, packaging me as the poor friend she'd lifted up. I did all the labor. She got the reputation for kindness and brilliance. No need. I closed my workbook. I don't want your charity. Sophia's smile froze. That evening, I went directly to the case social worker, Catherine Moore. I told her that if the Turners decided to pursue a deeper connection with me, any confirmation of intent had to be done in person, or through a verification phrase that only the two of us would know. Catherine looked surprised. You're worried someone might impersonate you and withdraw from the match? Yes, last life. Sophia waited until I was asleep, used the public computer to log into my email, and sent the social worker a withdrawal form. I had no idea at the time that after her first rejection, the Turners had seriously considered me. It wasn't until after I died, when Ethan investigated everything, that I learned that letter even existed. This life, I won't let her steal my choice again. Catherine didn't dismiss my concern as some petty squabble between kids. She added an identity verification requirement to my file and advised me to change my passwords. When I got back to the dorm, Sophia was sitting on the edge of my bed. Where did you go? Study hall. She stared at me for a few seconds, then suddenly smiled. Don't take this so seriously. The higher you hope, the harder you fall. I smiled back. You should save that advice for yourself. 3 weeks later, the Turner family's legal assistant arrived at Maplewood Children's Home alongside the social worker. They brought a full adolescent adoption assessment packet, medical authorization forms, education records, psychological support needs, and a transition visitation preference sheet. The moment Director Howard saw the documents, he called Sophia into his office. Sophia had changed into that white dress, wearing a carefully practiced look of reluctant shyness. I told you, I might not even go. Director Howard coaxed her with a smile. The Turners sent over all this paperwork. That shows real sincerity. You shouldn't keep shutting people out. A few kids crowded around the doorway, teasing, Sophia's going to be a Turner daughter. Don't forget us when you're rich. Sophia lowered her head and murmured, I just don't want Elizabeth to be too disappointed. It's not like I really want to go to their house. The legal assistant opened the file and asked, politely, could you point me to Lucy Bennett? The office went silent. Director Howard froze. Lucy, yes, these are the supplementary forms Lucy needs to fill out. The Turners would like to arrange several family meetings under the supervision of the State Child Welfare Department. Sophia's shy expression solidified into something brittle. Director Howard rushed to clarify, is there a mix-up? The person you've been tracking this whole time is Sophia. No mix-up. The assistant's tone was gentle, but it left no room for imagination. Sophia has explicitly declined to enter the matching process. The Turners respect her decision. I stepped out from behind the crowd and took the paperwork. Thank you, I'll fill these out carefully. The looks around me shifted instantly. It's just an assessment. It's not like they've decided to adopt her. Maybe they're just comparing her to Sophia. The Turners will eventually realize Sophia's a better fit. Sophia recovered her composure quickly and walked over to stand beside me. Lucy, wealthy families are cautious by nature. Evaluating one more person doesn't mean anything. Don't let your expectations get too high, even if it ends with you just being compared. At least you'll have seen how the other half lives. I tucked the forms into my folder and ignored her. I knew how the Turners operated last life. Before they decided to adopt Sophia, all 8 sons held a dedicated family meeting. Ethan researched the legal and financial arrangements, Michael contacted schools, Daniel handled the medical exams, and the youngest, Noah, even searched online for how to get along with a 15-year-old sister. They never treated adoption like an impulsive charity performance. Once formal evaluation began, it meant they were genuinely willing to take a child into their home. Over the next month, I attended 4 meetings. Elizabeth asked what kind of room I liked. Richard asked which school I wanted to transfer to. Catherine separately confirmed whether my intentions were being influenced by money or outside pressure. Every time, I gave the same answer. I know the Turner family is wealthy, and I know entering a new family will come with adjustments. I'm not going there to be a princess. I just want to be treated as an equal, to keep studying, and to have a place I can call home. My honesty did not disappoint them. If anything, it made Elizabeth like me even more. But Sophia grew more restless by the day. She started showing up at Director Howard's office every afternoon, volunteering for busy work, dropping hints that she had reconsidered. She wiped down her suitcase until it gleamed, folded and refolded her clothes, and spent hours saving photos of lakeside mansions and luxury bedrooms to her phone. One night, I came back from washing up and caught her tucking a white dress into that suitcase. I couldn't help it. A laugh slipped out. She whipped around. What are you laughing at? Did you really think filling out a few forms meant you actually had a chance? I'm prettier than you. I'm better with words. I'm more suited to be taken to banquets. If the Turner family wants a daughter, they'll choose me in the end. I looked at her, calm and steady. Then we'll wait for the results. What she didn't know was that, 2 hours earlier, Catherine had told me the family assessment had already passed. Next week, the Turners would come to pick me up and begin my 3-month transition placement. For the afternoon the Turners arrived, the children's home erupted. Everyone was certain they'd come for Sophia. Sophia claimed she didn't care, but she changed into a pale pink dress, rebraided her hair, and brushed on a light layer of lip gloss. Director Howard personally pulled her suitcase out for her. Be polite in your new home. If anything feels off, talk to your social worker right away. Sophia's eyes glistened with tears. I'll miss this place. The children crowded around her, hugging her, telling her to come back and visit. I stood at the foot of the stairs, still holding an English novel. No one called for me. When the black sedan pulled up outside, Director Howard pushed Sophia to the front. Richard, Elizabeth, Sophia is all ready. Elizabeth looked at the suitcase and visibly hesitated. I'm sorry, there's been a misunderstanding. We're here today to pick up Lucy for her transition placement. The courtyard went dead silent. Director Howard seemed not to have heard. Lucy, Richard handed her the temporary placement documents approved by the State Child Welfare Agency. The family investigation and matching assessment are complete. Formal adoption still requires a 3-month observation period and a family court hearing, but starting today, Lucy will be living with us. Sophia's face drained of color, little by little. But, I didn't say no later. I didn't mean it. Elizabeth turned to look at her. After your first clear refusal, we had the social worker confirm with you again. You still said that family ties couldn't be about money, and that you didn't want to enter the formal assessment. We respected your choice, so we didn't push further. Sophia's lips trembled. Director Howard rushed in. She's just young. She said the opposite out of fear. Please reconsider. Sophia excels in every way. Elizabeth's expression cooled. A 15-year-old's wishes must be respected, not overridden by adults who decide her no should become a yes. And this isn't a beauty pageant. We've already completed our matching assessment with Lucy. She stepped past the crowd and reached out her hand toward me. Lucy, will you still come home with us? I walked down the stairs and nodded firmly. Yes. Sophia suddenly grabbed my arm. Have you really thought this through? Rich families have so many rules. They already have 8 biological sons. How could they ever truly care about an outsider? You'll probably just end up as their servant. Don't come back crying when that happens. Elizabeth frowned. Our household has professional staff. We don't need a 15-year-old to work as a servant. Lucy is being placed in a family, not a labor contract. Sophia's hand froze. I gently pulled free from her grip. Back in the dormitory as I packed, she followed me in and shut the door. finally tearing off her mask of sweetness. What are you so smug about? They just picked a replacement after I turned them down. You'll always just be my backup. I folded a few old clothes into my travel bag. Think whatever you want, at least today. The people who came to pick someone up came for me. Sophia's eyes turned red. I reached the door, then paused. Not everyone is like you, wanting something, but pretending you don't care first. I want to be loved, so I'm willing to admit it. When Elizabeth took my travel bag, her expression softened with something like ache. That's all you have. It's enough. She reached out and touched my head. It's not enough. We'll make up for it, slowly, from now on. 5. On the drive from downtown Chicago to Lake Forest, I kept my fingers clenched tight around my backpack straps. Elizabeth handed me a bottle of water. Feeling nervous is normal. You don't need to try to please anyone. I froze, in my last life, every time Sophia came back to the children's home. She'd say the Turner household was impossibly strict. She had to memorize table manners, learn ballroom dancing, and flatter all 8 brothers every single day, or she'd be thrown out. Later, I found out those lessons were all her own idea. She wanted to package herself as a society lady, but blamed the pressure on the Turners as if they were tormenting their adopted daughter. Just to milk our sympathy, you're coming to our home. It's not an exam, Elizabeth said from the passenger seat. Richard added, though, you will still need to take the transfer test for Lakeshore Preparatory Academy. I couldn't help but laugh. The car wound through the lakeside neighborhood and finally stopped in front of a house that was spacious, but not flashy. 8 men stood at the door. The eldest, Ethan, wore a dark suit and looked stern, but he was the first to walk over and take my luggage. I'm Ethan. Whether it's during the transition period or after the formal adoption, if anything feels off, you can always tell me. Michael was a lawyer, soft-spoken, and had already prepared a full list of my educational and medical rights. Daniel was a doctor. The first thing he asked was whether I had any food allergies. James, William, Alexander, and Benjamin each introduced themselves in turn, and every single one of them had brought a completely different gift. The youngest, Noah, was still in college. He hid a thick exam prep guide behind his back, pretending he'd only brought candy. I don't know what a 15-year-old sister likes, he said, ears turning red. If the gift's not right, you can return it. My nose stung. In my last life, I could only see these people through the photos Sophia flaunted. She said Ethan was cold, Michael was hypocritical, Noah was immature, said all their affection was something she had manipulated into existence. But when they actually stood in front of me, I realized some kindness doesn't need to be manipulated at all. Elizabeth took my hand. Let's go home. My room was on the 2nd floor, cream-colored curtains, a wooden desk, a wall of bookshelves, and a cloud-shaped nightlight. On the desk sat a dictionary, a tablet, transfer documents, and a card. Welcome home, Lucy. It was signed with all 8 brothers' names. Elizabeth asked carefully, do you like it? If not, we can change everything. I love it. I nodded hard, and the tears finally fell. At dinner, all 8 of them took turns piling food onto my plate, and the scene quickly descended into chaos. Ethan reminded me to eat slowly. Daniel said I was too thin. Noah slid a study plan next to my hand, and Benjamin sneakily pushed a game console toward me. My phone buzzed. A message from Sophia. Did you arrive? Are they making you work right away? If they're bullying you, tell me. I can ask Director Howard to bring you back. I looked at the table full of people arguing over whose gift was more practical, and replied with one line, I'm doing great. Sophia responded quickly, no need to pretend, I understand. I turned off my phone. Some jokes lose their punch if you expose them too early. 6. The next day, Daniel took me for a full medical checkup. The results showed malnutrition, mild anemia, and long-term sleep deprivation. Elizabeth's eyes went red the moment she saw the report. A nutritionist joined the household soon after. No one forced me to learn so-called high society etiquette. No one asked me to serve anyone. Noah came home every day after school to help me prepare for the transfer exam. He always said he was afraid I'd embarrass him by failing, but his hands meticulously organized every single knowledge point. This formula shows up a lot. For reading comprehension, read the questions first, then the passage. Don't look at me like that. I just happen to have free time. Thank you, 8th brother. His ears immediately turned red. Every day I attended classes, reviewed, went to counseling, and had regular home visits. I was too busy to overthink anything, but Sophia kept messaging me. Are they not letting you go out freely? Are your 8 brothers ordering you around? Rich people are masters of putting on a show. Don't let them fool you. When my replies grew fewer and fewer, she started spreading rumors in the children's home group chat. Lucy might be doing chores and can't check her phone. She keeps saying she's fine, but she has a lot of pride. She probably doesn't want to admit she regrets it. Everyone, don't push her. Soon, everyone at the children's home believed I was living a miserable life at the Turner household. Noah saw the chat logs and was so furious he almost called to confront her directly. Why does she have to prove you're unhappy? I kept doing my practice problems, because that's the only way she can believe she didn't lose. So you're just letting her spread lies. If I explain now, she'll just say I'm being forced to play along with the Turners. I looked at the calendar. 3 weeks from now was my 16th birthday, and the day of my first scheduled family assessment. In my last life, the Turners threw a lavish welcome birthday party for Sophia and invited everyone from the children's home. In this life, Elizabeth had already asked for my opinion. The stage would be ready soon. All I had to do was let Sophia keep talking. The more she said, the louder the final slap would be. 2 days before the birthday party, Catherine showed me a forged email. The sender was impersonating me, claiming I couldn't adapt to the Turner family, demanding the placement be terminated immediately, and recommending Sophia as my replacement. The email was sent from the public computer in the children's home library. They knew my birth date and old file number, but they didn't know the verification phrase Catherine and I had agreed on. Catherine had already asked the children's home to preserve the login records and surveillance footage. I looked at the email. No surprise. In my last life, she'd pulled off the exact same trick. In this life, that letter would only become evidence she'd left with her own hands. 7. On the day of the birthday party, the children's home arrived at Lake Forest in 2 buses. Sophia wore an expensive dress. The moment she stepped inside, she grabbed Director Howard's hand, her face full of worry. Lucy won't tell the truth. If you find out she's being mistreated today, you have to take her away. Several kids chimed in. Rich people are never easy to get along with. Sophia was right to refuse in the first place. Lucy's probably waiting on them hand and foot every day. Before they could finish, I walked down the stairs. I was wearing a pale blue dress Elizabeth had picked out for me, my hair braided simply, with only a pearl pin holding it in place. No extravagant jewelry, yet everyone could see that I was being well cared for. The pallor from years of malnutrition had faded, and my wrists no longer looked like they might snap with the slightest pressure. Elizabeth held my arm. Lucy, your friends are here. Director Howard blinked, taking a moment to process. You look so much better. Sophia's expression flickered, but she quickly recovered her smile. On the surface, yes, but privately. Noah walked over with a glass of warm water. Little sister, the doctor said you shouldn't drink too much cold stuff today. He handed me the cup, then turned to Sophia. What were you saying about privately? Sophia froze. Nothing. I was just worried about her. The other brothers quickly gathered around. Michael gave me a learning laptop. William had prepared a custom microphone, Alexander gifted a bicycle, and Benjamin insisted everyone watch the birthday game he'd made first. All 8 of them bickered over whose gift was the best. The children from the orphanage stared in complete disbelief. They'd thought I was just the Turner family's little maid. Instead, I was the only sister in the family who needed to be looked after. Elizabeth led Director Howard and the social worker on a tour of my room. Sophia stood at the desk, taking in the Lakeview Preparatory Academy admission goals, the full set of tutoring materials, and the family photos on the wall. Her nails nearly dug into her palms. You're really letting her keep studying. Michael frowned. Education is her right. Why wouldn't we? I thought wealthy families valued etiquette and refined talents more. We adopted a child, not a product for display. Those words landed like a slap across Sophia's face. When the banquet began, Elizabeth took my hand and announced the family assessment results to everyone. Over the past 2 months, all of us have become increasingly certain that Lucy is the daughter and sister we've been waiting for. If she's still willing, we'll submit a formal adoption application to the family court after the observation period ends. Applause rippled through the room, but Sophia suddenly shot to her feet. No, her eyes were bloodshot, her voice shrill. Why her? She just happened to raise her hand after I did. That day, if I hadn't refused, the person standing here today would have been me. The entire banquet hall fell silent in an instant. Elizabeth looked at her, her gaze turning ice cold. Sophia, wasn't refusing to be adopted by a wealthy family your own publicly stated choice? Sophia's face went pale. I was scared back then. I didn't really mean to refuse. We had the social worker confirm again afterward. Elizabeth said calmly, you still declined to enter the assessment, but I never thought they'd actually choose her. The moment the words left her mouth, she realized she'd exposed her true feelings. Noah let out a cold laugh. So you didn't actually not want to be adopted, you just wanted to refuse a few times first, so everyone would think we couldn't live without you. Then why did you spread rumors that Lucy was being abused here? Sophia shook her head frantically. I was just worried about her. I pulled out my phone and projected the messages she'd sent me, along with the group chat logs, onto the living room screen. Every sentence that looked like concern was actually hinting that the Turner family was mistreating me. Whenever someone asked for the facts, she'd answer, "Lucy is strong-willed." She'd never admit it. That framing never gave me a chance to clarify from the start. If I said I was being treated badly, she could claim she'd been right all along. If I said I was being treated well, she'd say I was just putting on a brave face. Director Howard finished reading, his face full of disappointment. Sophia, why would you do this? Because she stole my opportunity. I didn't steal anything. I looked at her. I just honestly stated what I wanted after you refused. The one who really tried to steal someone else's choice was you. Catherine stood up at that moment. She didn't reveal all the investigation materials about the minor involved, only explaining that the social worker had received a withdrawal email impersonating me, and that the sending location traced back to inside the orphanage. The police wouldn't immediately send a 15-year-old girl to prison over a prank email, but the Child Welfare Agency would investigate identity fraud and interference with the placement process. When Sophia heard the words, login records, and surveillance footage, the last trace of color drained from her face. I didn't. Her voice was barely a whisper, all her earlier self-righteousness gone. I turned to Elizabeth. Mom, the Turner Foundation can continue helping the orphanage according to the standard guidelines, but Sophia once applied for a personal clothing and social skills stipend in my name. Please cancel that special request, since she believes that accepting extra resources from wealthy families corrupts family bonds. We should respect her position. Sophia's head snapped up. No, Noah scoffed. Why not? Didn't you say you didn't care about money? Basic education, room and board, and medical care won't be affected, I said. What's being cancelled is just the private gifts and courses she applied for behind everyone's backs, using my name. Sophia rushed up to me. You already have so much. Why do you have to push me to the edge? I looked at her calmly. I'm not pushing you. I'm just making your words come true, and taking back what you tried to steal from me. Her carefully crafted image of noble indifference shattered completely in that moment. Director Howard demanded she apologize to me publicly. Sophia admitted she'd spread rumors out of jealousy, and acknowledged that the withdrawal email was connected to her. With every word she spoke, the hatred in her eyes deepened, but I no longer cared whether she hated me. In my last life, I was terrified that one word from her could sway everyone, terrified of being cast out again. In this life, I had evidence, and I had family who actually listened. She could never again decide who believed me. 9. After the birthday banquet ended, Ava, the little girl I was closest to, wrapped her arms around me and refused to let go. Lucy, you're really doing well now. I patted her head. Yeah, you study hard too. We'll both be fine. Ava had a congenital hearing impairment and needed a new cochlear implant processor. The children's home had been waiting for a spot in a charity program. Elizabeth stood nearby and said softly, Ethan has already submitted her medical files to the Foundation's independent review committee. As long as she meets the criteria, the costs will be paid directly to the hospital. My eyes burned with warmth. In my last life, whenever Sophia used the foundation to help the children's home, she always made the kids thank her in front of the cameras. She turned kindness into a tool for building her image. In this life, I didn't need anyone to know that Ava's help had anything to do with me. It turned out that once you've truly been loved, you can quietly pass that love on to others, without needing to stand on them to prove how noble you are. After the birthday banquet, Sophia stayed silent for a long time, not because she had suddenly changed, but because no one believed her holier-than-thou speeches anymore. She used to say she didn't care about wealthy families, and everyone would praise her for having principles. Now, when she said the same things, everyone remembered the words she had shouted at the banquet. If I hadn't refused, the one standing there should have been me. Worse still, after investigating the public computers at the children's home, they confirmed she had used my old file information to send the withdrawal email. Because she was a minor, the institution didn't turn it into a simple criminal punishment. Instead, they revoked her access to other children's files and public accounts, and required her to undergo mandatory psychological counseling and an online conduct course. But she never truly reflected. Months later, she took an application essay I had written, changed the name, and submitted it to a National Youth Scholarship. In my last life, that very essay had earned her her first major scholarship. This time, I had already saved the draft, the revision history, and the timestamps through the school platform. After the review committee received an anonymous challenge, they quickly confirmed the plagiarism. Sophia was disqualified. The children's home also barred her from representing the institution at public fundraising events. She wrote a long post on social media, claiming she had voluntarily rejected a wealthy family, insisted on an independent life, and was now being retaliated against for refusing to bow down. But the comments section didn't praise her like it had in my last life. If you really didn't care, why did you impersonate Lucy to send that withdrawal email? If you really wanted independence, why did you apply for private aid under someone else's name? Refusing is your right, but accepting is someone else's right too. The aloof image she had carefully cultivated for years was shattered by her own actions. I didn't keep following it. Her cruelest punishment wasn't losing a banquet, it was having to face her true self, alone, without applause, without privileges, and without my essays to steal. 10. The Turner Foundation signed a long-term cooperation agreement with Maplewood Children's Home. The dormitories were renovated, the library gained new equipment, every child now had an individual education file. Children needing medical help were assessed anonymously by a third-party committee. No extra favors for those who cried louder, were prettier, or charmed adults better. Director Howard came to see me privately later. Lucy, I was biased before. I always thought Sophia was sensitive and needed more care, but I forgot that quiet, well-behaved children can get hurt too. She held my hand, her eyes reddening. Thank goodness you raised your hand that day. I smiled. Yes, thank goodness I had experienced death once and finally understood that opportunity doesn't come knocking just because you're well-behaved and silent. If you want to study, say you want to study. If you want a family, admit you want to be loved. That's not greed. On the day of the formal adoption hearing, everyone in the Turner family came to the Illinois Family Court. The judge asked me and the Turners about our wishes separately, and confirmed that I understood the legal implications of adoption. Richard signed with a serious expression, but his fingers trembled slightly. Elizabeth held my hand the whole time, her palm damp with sweat. The 8 brothers stood in the back row, like a tall wall. When the judge declared the adoption official, Noah was the first to cry, then insisted it was just the courtroom air conditioning making his eyes water. When the new birth certificate was registered, my name became Lucy Turner. In this life, there were no floating words telling me the ending, no mysterious force guaranteeing they would choose me. All I had was the memory of my last life, and the courage, reborn, to never shrink back again. On the day of the transfer exam for Lakeside Preparatory Academy, the whole family insisted on walking me to the school gate. Elizabeth straightened my collar. Just do your best, come home for dinner after the exam. Noah tried to stuff a final page of formulas into my hands, but Michael snatched it away. Don't add more anxiety before the test. Benjamin handed me a piece of candy. Ethan looked at me and said, go on in, we'll all be right outside, no matter what happens. You have a home to come back to. I nodded firmly and turned to walk into the exam hall. That day, I wasn't afraid, because I finally knew that someone would be waiting for me to come home. When the results came out, I was officially admitted with the highest tier of scores, and earned an academic scholarship as well. Elizabeth cried harder than I did. Richard said we should celebrate quietly, then promptly ordered a 3-tier cake. Years later, I got into the University of Chicago on my own merit. Ava finished her treatment, too. The first time she heard birdsong clearly, she sent me a voice message, sobbing so hard her words came out in broken, tangled pieces. As for Sophia, she eventually finished her standard high school curriculum. No Turner Family Education Fund, no stolen application materials, no crowd of admirers circling her, praising her for being above it all. She had to apply to schools on her own merits, answer for every word she'd ever spoken. That's the ending I left her with, not pushing her into the abyss, just taking back everything she'd stolen from me, and setting her down on the path she chose herself, so she could never climb up by stepping on me again. In my last life, I lost because I hid my wishes away and handed my choices to someone else. In this life, I won because when everyone else bowed their heads and stayed silent, I raised my hand. I told them, plainly and openly, I want to study, I want to be loved, I want a home, and in the end, I truly had all of it. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time. In my previous life, my mother-in-law asked me to write down my name and birth date, claiming it was to honor our ancestors, but then she secretly used my birth date to extend the life of my sister-in-law, who had cancer. I aged rapidly and died. After being reborn, on the day I was asked to write my birth date again, I deliberately wrote down the birth date of a disabled elderly person, Let's see what you use to extend your life now. Footsteps sounded outside. It was my mother-in-law. I heard her talking to someone at the door, her voice hushed, but for some reason, my hearing had sharpened as I aged. She said, soon, looking at her condition, she won't last the month. Once she closes her eyes, our Xiaoxiao will be completely cured. Xiaoxiao is her daughter, my sister-in-law. The door opened, and my mother-in-law came in carrying a bowl of thin porridge, a forced smile on her face. Here, Nian, have some porridge. I looked at the bowl, so watery I could see my reflection, with barely any rice grains to count. 3 years ago, when I first married into this family, she wasn't like this. Back then, she would cook delicious meals for me every day, pork rib soup, braised pork, steamed fish, never repeating a dish. I was foolish enough to boast to my own mother, saying how lucky I was to have such a caring mother-in-law. My mother sighed at the time and said, as long as she treats you well, live a good life. Looking back now, I realize my mother probably saw something back then, but I was too blinded by love to understand anything. My mother-in-law placed the porridge bowl on the bedside table and left without waiting for me to drink it. The door wasn't fully closed, leaving a crack. I heard her enter the next room, where my sister-in-law Xiaoxiao lived. Xiaoxiao's voice came through, full of energy, nothing like a sick person. Soon, don't worry, Mom made you ginseng soup. Drink it while it's hot. If it weren't for needing her life to extend mine, I would have kicked her out long ago. Just looking at her face annoys me, old and ugly, absolutely disgusting. Alright, enough, once she's dead, this house will be ours. I've already checked with her family. No influential relatives. They won't cause any trouble. I leaned against the headboard, listening to these words, yet my heart remained surprisingly calm. It wasn't that I wasn't sad. I had already grieved long ago. When I first discovered the truth, I cried, I made a scene, I begged, but it was useless. My dear husband knew about this from start to finish. His mother planned to trade my life for his sister's, and he knew all about it. I asked him why, and he said, Xiaoxiao is my own sister. She's only 25 and hasn't even gotten married yet. You're older than her. Just think of it as giving in to her, giving her my life. I wanted to laugh at the time, but my face was already stiff, and I couldn't even manage a smile. I lay in bed like a worn-out rag, tossed into a corner to wait for mold to set in. Meanwhile, Xiaoxiao next door grew more spirited by the day. She had been diagnosed with cancer, and the doctors said she wouldn't live more than 6 months, but now, 3 years had passed, and she was healthier than when I first met her. 3 years ago, I had just been married to my husband, Zhang Jianguo, for 3 months. One day, my mother-in-law suddenly called me into her room, looking both mysterious and devout. Nian, Mom wants to ask you for a favor. Our family has an ancestral tradition. When a new bride enters the household, she must write down her birth date and time on a piece of red paper to be offered to the ancestors, praying for your happiness as a couple and for an early arrival of a precious child. I was quite moved at the time, thinking this family took traditions seriously and valued me. Without hesitation, I agreed. My mother-in-law took out a piece of red paper, along with a brush and ink. I took the brush and obediently wrote down my name, date of birth, and the exact time. She took the red paper, held it up to the light to examine it carefully, folded it neatly, and said she would place it before the ancestral tablet. I still remember the look on her face at that moment. Her eyes lit up, and the corners of her mouth lifted slightly. At the time, I thought she was happy, but looking back now, it was the excitement of having succeeded. After writing that, I started feeling off. First, I had nightmares every night, dreaming that something was pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. Then, I lost all energy, feeling drowsy and listless during the day, unable to muster any enthusiasm for anything. I went to the hospital for a checkup, and the doctor said there was nothing wrong. I was just too tired and needed to rest properly. I rested, but I didn't get better. Instead, I got worse. One day, I looked in the mirror and suddenly noticed fine lines at the corners of my eyes. I'm only 29, how could I have wrinkles? I panicked and bought the most expensive eye cream, applying it every day, but it didn't help. The wrinkles kept increasing, my skin grew darker, and my hair started falling out. I told my husband, and he said I was making a fuss, that it was just stress and I'd get better after a while. I told my mother-in-law, and she sighed, saying maybe I had offended something, and suggested she take me to the temple to pray. I actually went with her. At the temple, an old Taoist priest glanced at me, and his expression changed. He pulled my mother-in-law aside and whispered for a long time. When When she came back, her face looked grim, saying it was nothing, just a minor misfortune that could be resolved by spending some money. Later, I found out that the old priest had said that day, "This girl's life has been borrowed, you should quickly check if there's anything unusual." Of course, my mother-in-law didn't tell me. Later, my sister-in-law, Xiuxiu, fell ill. Xiuxiu had always been frail, sickly since childhood. My mother-in-law said it was something she was born with, and there was nothing to do but care for her. When Xiuxiu was 25, she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. The doctor said she had at most 6 months. My mother-in-law cried her heart out, and my husband sighed every day. At that time, even though I was suffering myself, I forced myself to help take care of Xiuxiu, brewing her medicine, cooking for her, washing her clothes. I gave everything I could, but what they wanted was my life. Xiuxiu's condition suddenly began to improve. The doctor called it a miracle. My mother-in-law said it was the ancestors' blessing. Only I was becoming less and less like a person. 3 years, a full 3 years. I went from a 29-year-old young woman to a 70-something-year-old old lady, lying in bed, listening to Xiuxiu's hearty laughter next door. A sudden surge of anger rose in my heart. Why should I die? What did I do wrong? Just because I married into their family, just because I was kind-hearted, just because I was a few years older than Xiuxiu, I couldn't accept it. This anger burned inside me, making my whole body hot. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling without blinking. I wanted to remember this feeling, remember this hatred, remember this blood debt. Outside, the sky gradually darkened. My mother-in-law came in to collect the porridge bowl without even glancing at me. Xiuxiu's light was on, the TV was playing, and bursts of laughter drifted over. I closed my eyes and fell asleep. At some point, I had a dream. In the dream, I went back 3 years. My mother-in-law was holding a red paper, smiling as she asked me to write down my birth date. Just as I picked up the pen to write, I suddenly heard someone shouting in my ear, "Don't write, don't write." I abruptly opened my eyes. Sunlight streamed in through the window, stinging my eyes. I raised my hand to block it and suddenly froze. This was my hand, fair and tender fingers, slender nails, painted with light pink nail polish. I sat up abruptly, looking down at myself, a young body, smooth skin, and a head of black hair cascading over my shoulders. I jumped out of bed like a madwoman, barefoot, and ran to the mirror. The person in the mirror was me, the 32-year-old me, but as I was at 29, the year I had just married into this family, I stood frozen in front of the mirror, tears streaming down my face. I pinched my cheek. It hurt. I twisted my arm. It hurt. This wasn't a dream. It was real. I was back. Footsteps sounded from outside. It was my mother-in-law. She was knocking on the door. "Nian Nian, are you up? Mom has something to discuss with you." Hearing her voice, all the blood in my body rushed to my head. I took a deep breath, wiped the tears from my face, and walked over to open the door. My mother-in-law stood at the doorway, holding a red piece of paper, a wide smile plastered on her face. "Nian Nian, come here, Mom has something to tell you. Our family has an ancestral tradition. When a new bride enters the household, she must write down her birth details on this paper for the ancestors to bless the newlyweds with harmony and the early arrival of a precious child, word for word, exactly the same as in my previous life." I looked at the red paper in her hand, at the smile on her face, and suddenly, my heart grew calm. The debts from my past life, this time, I'd settle them properly. I smiled and said, "All right, Mom, I'll write it right away." She followed closely behind, her eyes fixed intently on the paper in my hand. I sat down at the table, picked up a brush, and dipped it in ink. What had I written in my previous life? My real name, my true birth details, and the exact time of my birth. This time, my mind raced. Whose details should I write? Writing a random one wouldn't work. They'd surely find a way to verify it. It had to be a real person's details, and someone with particularly bad fortune. Suddenly, a person came to mind, Old Lady Wang, who collected scrap at the entrance of our neighborhood. She was 78 years old, had trouble walking, and limped along. I'd heard she broke her leg when she was young, couldn't afford treatment, and was left disabled. Her husband had died long ago. Her son ignored her, and she lived alone in a shabby shack behind the neighborhood, surviving by collecting scrap. I happened to know her birth details. In my previous life, when I was nearing death, I overheard my mother-in-law chatting with Xiuxiu. Xiuxiu asked, "Mom, what would happen if that fate-borrowing spell borrowed the fate of a bad person?" My mother-in-law replied, "It depends on the person. If you borrow the fate of someone like Old Lady Wang, disabled and poor, the borrower won't fare well either. That's why you have to pick someone with good fortune to borrow from, at the time. I memorized old lady Wang's age and later made a point of finding out her birth details. Now, they'd come in handy. I picked up the pen and carefully wrote down Granny Wang's name, date of birth, and even the exact hour of her birth, stroke by stroke, neat and tidy. After finishing, I looked up and handed the paper to my mother-in-law with a smile. "Mom, it's done." She took it, glanced at the paper, and couldn't suppress the smile at the corner of her mouth. She carefully folded the red paper and said, "Good, good, good, I'll go offer it right away. Nyen Nyen, you rest, I'll make you something delicious for lunch." She turned and left, her steps light and quick. I sat in the chair, watching her figure disappear through the doorway, and slowly broke into a grin. Granny Wang's fate, borrow it well, once you've borrowed it, let's see who gets unlucky first. After my mother-in-law left, I sat alone in the room, looking at myself in the mirror, and laughed for quite a while. Footsteps grew closer, and the door was pushed open. Zhang Jianguo stood in the doorway, holding a bag of fruit, a smile on his face. "Nyen Nyen, I bought you strawberries, your favorite." Looking at that face, my heart churned with turmoil. In my past life, when I was dying, he had come to my room, just once. By then, I was old and frail, lying in bed, barely able to open my eyes. He stood at the doorway, frowned, and said, "Mom, why isn't she dead yet?" My mother-in-law lowered her voice and replied, "Soon, soon, don't come in, it's bad luck." And he really never came in again. Now he stood before me again, a young face, a concerned expression, still holding strawberries. What a good man, such a caring husband. I tugged at the corner of my mouth and smiled. "Just put them there." He set the strawberries on the table, walked over, and sat beside me, reaching out to put his arm around my shoulder. I shifted my body, avoiding him. He paused, asking, "What's wrong?" I said, "Nothing, just a bit hot." Without overthinking it, he stood up to open the window. I watched his retreating figure, my mind churning. Did he know, in our past life, did he know that his mother used my life to save his sisters? Of course he knew everything, yet he still let me give up my life. He opened the window and glanced back at me. "Mom said she just had you write down your birth details. It's a family tradition, don't take it to heart, it's just a formality." I nodded. "I know. Mom told me, it's to honor the ancestors and bless the two of us." He smiled and sat back down beside me. "Right, that's the idea. Oh, and Mom also said she's making something delicious for lunch. We'll have a nice family meal together." Family. I looked down at my hands, fair and delicate hands. In my past life, what had these hands become? Wrinkled skin stretched over bones, nails yellowed and thickened, unable even to make a fist. "Jianguo," I looked up at him. "How has Xiuxiu been feeling lately?" His expression shifted slightly but quickly returned to normal. "She's all right, same as always. You know she's been frail since childhood. Last time, didn't they say they found some illness?" No, it's just a minor issue, she'll recover with some rest." After saying this, he stood up, clearly unwilling to continue the topic. "I'll go see if Mom needs any help. You rest." I watched his retreating figure, a cold laugh echoing in my heart. A minor ailment, in my past life. It was clearly terminal cancer. Of course, it's a minor ailment now, because soon my life will be used to extend hers. No, not mine, Mother Wang's life. At lunchtime, the whole family was gathered. My mother-in-law had prepared a table full of dishes: braised pork, sweet and sour spare ribs, steamed perch, and a large bowl of chicken soup. She kept piling food into my bowl. "Nyen Nyen, eat more, you're too thin. Young people need proper nutrition to be healthy for childbirth later." "Xiuxiu." I took the initiative to speak up. "You don't look too well, are you feeling unwell?" Somewhere, she lifted her head, a flicker of wariness flashing in her eyes, and forced a slight smile. "It's nothing, just trouble sleeping." "That won't do," my mother-in-law quickly chimed in. "Later, Mom will make you some calming soup. By the way, Nyen Nyen, isn't that traditional Chinese medicine doctor you know quite skilled? How about taking Xiuxiu to see him another day?" In my past life, I did know an old Chinese medicine practitioner who helped regulate my health. My mother-in-law was testing to see if I was willing to help. Of course, I was willing. "Sure, I'll take Xiuxiu another day." I agreed with a smile, but in my heart, I was thinking, I'll take you, so I can watch how you get better day by day." Xiuxiu glanced at me, her expression complex, a mix of wariness, suspicion, and a hint of gratitude. she probably didn't expect her sister-in-law to be so enthusiastic. After the meal, I proactively helped clear the dishes. My mother-in-law declined a couple of times but then let me be. While washing dishes in the kitchen, I overheard her talking to Xiaoxiao in the living room, her voice hushed. Mom, is that thing really effective? Of course, it's effective. Mom found a master, spent a fortune on it, but that belongs to sister-in-law. Shoo, keep your voice down. My mother-in-law cut her off. What sister-in-law? Once she married into our family, she became one of us. Besides, she's in good health. So what's wrong with borrowing a bit of your life? It won't kill anyone. It won't kill anyone. My hand paused for a moment, nearly dropping the bowl. In my past life, I died, completely and utterly. Xiaoxiao didn't say anything more, and I continued washing the dishes, cleaning each one thoroughly before putting them back in the cupboard. In the afternoon, Zhang Jingguo said he had to work overtime and left. I went back to my room, lay on the bed, and stared at the ceiling, thinking. In my past life, about a week after I wrote down my birth date, my mother-in-law started bringing people home, an old woman who looked to be in her 60s, dressed in tattered clothes and carrying a cloth bag. My mother-in-law said she was a relative from the countryside who would stay for a few days and then leave. That old woman stayed at our house for a month. A month later, Xiaoxiao began to recover, while I started having nightmares. In this life, I need to figure out who that old woman really is and what method she used. Just as I was thinking this, there was a knock at the door. I got up to answer it. It was Xiaoxiao. She stood at the door, looking a bit uneasy, her fingers twisting the hem of her clothes. Sister-in-law, can I talk to you for a moment? I stepped aside. Come in. She walked in and sat down on the edge of my bed, head bowed, not saying a word. I leaned against the desk, waiting for her to speak. After a long while, she finally looked up, her eyes slightly red. Sister-in-law, I have a bad illness. My heart sank. I hadn't expected her to bring it up herself. In my past life, she never mentioned it to me, always avoiding me instead. What illness? Cancer. As she said the word, tears began to fall. The doctor says I have at most 6 months. I looked at her, unsure of what to say. Did I know she was pretending, or was she genuinely crying to me? In my past life, she had called me a bitch to my face. Her mother used my life to extend hers, and she knew about it from start to finish, even complaining that I was dying too slowly. But now, she was sitting here, crying and telling me she had cancer, like an ordinary, frightened young woman. Sister-in-law, I'm scared. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. I don't want to die. I'm only 25. I stayed silent for a moment, then walked over and sat beside her, patting her hand. Don't be afraid, you'll get better. She grabbed my hand, holding it tightly. After a long while, Xiaoxiao finally raised her head, her eyes slightly red. Sister-in-law, I have a bad illness. My heart sank. I hadn't expected her to tell me on her own. In my past life, she had never mentioned it to me, always avoiding me whenever we met. What illness? Cancer. As she uttered those 2 words, tears began to fall. The doctor said at most 6 months. Sister-in-law, I'm scared. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. I don't want to die. I'm only 25. I stayed silent for a moment, then walked over and sat beside her, patting her hand. Don't be afraid. You'll get better. She grabbed my hand, holding it tightly. Sister-in-law, you'll help me, right? You're my sister-in-law. You'll help me, won't you? I looked at her hand, fair and delicate, with neatly trimmed nails. In my past life, did these hands eventually become as old as mine? No, she remained young and healthy, living on with my life. Yes, I heard myself say, I'll help you. She released my hand, wiped her tears, and forced a smile. Thank you, sister-in-law. The old woman's voice carried a hint of confusion. This birth chart, this fate, it's not quite what you described. What's wrong? Is it bad? Not bad, but this fate is one of longevity, yet also one of loneliness. You'll live, but you'll suffer. Your legs and feet will be weak, your later years bleak, and your children and grandchildren unfilial. I covered my mouth, almost laughing out loud. Yes, that's exactly Granny Wang's fate. Weak legs and feet, unfilial descendants, a life of suffering. My mother-in-law fell silent for a moment, then said, well, can it still be used? It can be used, but, forget it, since it's already been brought, let's use it. After all, it's about extending life. As long as she lives longer, who cares what kind of life it is? All right, you decide. I quietly retreated to my own room, closed the door, lay on the bed, and stared at the ceiling with my eyes wide open. Use it well, I want to see just what kind of person your Xiaoxiao will become with Granny Wang's fate. The next day, the old woman began her ritual. My mother-in-law said she needed to chant scriptures in front of the ancestral tablets at home and asked us not to disturb her. Zhang Jianguo went to work as usual. Xiaoxiao hid in her room and refused to come out, and I sat alone in the living room pretending to watch TV, my ears perked up. The old woman stayed in my mother-in-law's room the entire day, not even coming out for lunch. My mother-in-law brought the food in for her. In the afternoon, I heard some strange noises coming from inside, like chanting or something rattling. In the evening, the old woman emerged. Her face was pale, as if she was exhausted. Seeing me sitting in the living room, she paused for a moment, then smiled and said, "Nian Nian is home." I stood up and asked with concern, "Auntie, are you tired? Let me pour you a glass of water." "No need," she waved her hand. "I'll just go back to my room and rest." As she passed by me, I caught a whiff of a fragrance on her, like the scent of burning incense, but not quite the same, a bit pungent. During dinner, Xiaoxiao said she was tired and didn't come out. My mother-in-law brought the food to her room and came out with a smile on her face, one she couldn't suppress. I understood then, the old woman had likely completed the ritual and had already begun transferring the life force to Xiaoxiao. Over the next few days, I observed Xiaoxiao's changes closely. For the first 2 days, there was no noticeable difference. She was still sickly, unable to eat or sleep well, her face sallow. On the 3rd day, she ate half a bowl more during meals. On the 4th day, she came out and sat in the living room for a while, watching TV. On the 5th day, a bit of color returned to her face, and the dark circles under her eyes lightened. My mother-in-law was overjoyed, constantly murmuring about the ancestors' blessings. Zhang Jianguo was happy too, talking more during meals. Only I felt a growing chill in my heart. It wasn't because the fake birth chart I wrote was useless, it was because their reaction to Xiaoxiao's slight improvement made them so happy. In my past life, as I aged day by day and moved closer to death, were they ever this happy? No, they were only impatient, resentful, and patiently waiting for me to die. In the evening, the old lady came out. Her face was a bit pale, as if she was quite exhausted. Seeing me sitting in the living room, she paused for a moment, then smiled and said, "Nian Nian is home." I stood up and asked with concern, "Auntie, are you tired? Let me pour you a glass of water." "No need," she waved her hand. "I'll just go back to my room and rest." As she walked past me, I caught a scent on her. It smelled like incense, but not quite the same, a bit pungent. A few more days passed, and Xiaoxiao was getting better and better. She could go outside, take walks downstairs, help her mother-in-law with cooking. Her complexion became rosy, and she even gained some weight. When she smiled, her eyes curved, and she looked no different from a healthy person. Her mother-in-law told everyone she met that her daughter had encountered a benefactor and was cured. The neighbors all said Xiaoxiao was lucky to have such a good mother. No one asked about me, no one even glanced my way. I didn't mind, I was waiting. Granny Wang's fate was starting to take effect. That evening, I was on the balcony collecting clothes when I happened to see Granny Wang returning from outside. She was carrying a large bag filled with plastic bottles she had picked up. Walking with a limp, the bag dragged on the ground, making a grating sound. Watching her back, seeing her struggle to climb the stairs, I suddenly felt a pang of discomfort. She was innocent. From start to finish, she had no idea someone like me existed, let alone what her birth details were being used for. But her fate was now being drained by my sister-in-law. Had I done something wrong? The thought had barely surfaced before I crushed it myself. What did I do wrong? I simply didn't let them succeed. Granny Wang's fate was already bitter. How much worse could it get? As for Xiaoxiao, if she took Granny Wang's fate, what would happen to Granny Wang? Will I die? Will I get better? I don't know, but if I hadn't been reborn, in my previous life, my life was sucked dry by them. After I died, would they feel guilty? Would they be sad? Would they burn even a single piece of paper for me? No, they would live happily, using my life to live their good days. So I am not wrong. During dinner that evening, Xiaoxiao suddenly put down her chopsticks, clutching her leg, her face scrunched up in pain. What's wrong? What did I do wrong? I just didn't let them succeed. Granny Wang's life was already bitter. How much worse could it get? But if Xiaoxiao sucked her life away, what would happen to Granny Wang? That day, I was reading in my room when I heard a scream from next door, followed by a dull thud of something hitting the floor. I put down my book and ran over, pushing the door open to find Xiaoxiao sitting on the floor, clutching her leg. Her face pale. What's wrong? I crouched down to ask about her leg, but it suddenly went weak, unable to support her. She was in so much pain she gasped for breath, beads of sweat forming on her forehead. I looked down at her leg. There was nothing visibly wrong, no redness or swelling. I pressed her hand firmly against it, just below the knee, where her fingernails had dug into the flesh. Granny heard the commotion and rushed over, and together we helped Xiaoxiao back to bed. Granny quickly asked, "What happened?" Xiaoxiao clutched her leg, her face twisted in pain. My leg suddenly cramped up. "It hurts." Granny helped her back to her room. I sat at the dining table, slowly picking at my food. Cramps. Granny Wang's leg had an old problem. It had been broken when she was young and would ache on cloudy or rainy days. Xiaoxiao's leg had never had any issues before. I was reading in my room that day when I heard a scream from next door, followed by a dull thud of something hitting the floor. I put down my book and ran over, pushing the door open to find Xiaoxiao sitting on the floor, clutching her leg, her face pale. "What happened?" I crouched down and asked. She gasped in pain. My leg suddenly went weak. I couldn't stand. Beads of sweat dotted her forehead. I looked down at her leg. Nothing seemed unusual on the surface, no redness or swelling, but her hand was pressed tightly against the area just below her knee, her nails digging into her flesh. Over the next few days, I kept a close eye on Xiaoxiao, observing her changes every day. On the surface, she did seem to be getting more energetic day by day, eating more, her complexion improving, able to go downstairs for walks. But if you looked closely, something was off. When she walked, her left foot would hesitate slightly as it touched the ground, so lightly that you wouldn't notice unless you were paying attention. When she sat, she would unconsciously rub her left leg, and afterward, she'd stare blankly, as if lost in thought. While eating, sometimes she'd pause with her chopsticks in mid-air, her gaze fixed, and it would take several calls to snap her out of it. Mother-in-law noticed these changes but didn't think anything of it. She only saw that Xiaoxiao was healthier, more energetic, and eating better, so she was overjoyed and didn't pay attention to these small details. Zhang Jingguo was even less observant. He left early and returned late every day, collapsing on the sofa as soon as he got home, scrolling through short videos on his phone, completely detached from household matters. Only I saw it and kept it in mind. That night, when I got up to use the bathroom, I passed by mother-in-law's room and heard voices inside again. This time, it wasn't the old lady but mother-in-law herself on the phone. "Master, let me tell you something. Xiaoxiao's leg has been hurting a lot lately, and she's not walking very smoothly." "You say that's normal. How long will it last?" "What, half a year, that long? Alright, I'll listen to you." I stood motionless in the darkness. Half a year. Granny Wang's leg pain had lasted for over 60 years, and Xiaoxiao was just getting started. Over the next few days, I kept a close eye on Xiaoxiao, observing her changes every day. On the surface, she did seem to be getting more energetic day by day, eating more, her complexion improving, able to go downstairs for walks. But if you looked closely, something was off. When she walked, her left foot would hesitate slightly as it touched the ground, so lightly that you wouldn't notice unless you were paying attention. When she sat, she would unconsciously rub her left leg, and afterward, she'd stare blankly, as if lost in thought. While eating, sometimes she'd pause with her chopsticks in mid-air, her gaze fixed, and it would take several calls to snap her out of it. The next morning, I went downstairs to buy groceries. On my way back, I happened to see Granny Wang rummaging through a trash bin. She was bent over, almost halfway inside the bin, her hands digging around, picking out plastic bottles and cardboard that could be sold for money and stuffing them into a bag beside her. I stood not far away and watched her for a while. Her leg was more crippled than before, once a limp, now a wobble with every step, needing the support of a wall to stay steady. After finishing with one bin, she straightened up, leaning against a nearby utility pole to catch her breath for a long while. Her hands were as dry as tree bark, her joints swollen and knobby, clearly the result of years of hard labor. I walked over and handed her a bag of oranges. "Granny Wang, these are for you." She was taken aback, looked up at me, her eyes clouded and hazy. It took her a while to recognize me. "Oh, it's the wife from the Zhang family. How can I accept this?" No, I can't. Take them. I bought too many and can't finish them all." I shoved the bag into her hands and turned to leave. The next morning, I went downstairs to buy groceries. On my way back, I happened to see Granny Wang rummaging through a trash bin. She was bent over, almost halfway inside the bin, her hands digging around, picking out plastic bottles and cardboard that could be sold for money and stuffing them into a bag beside her. I stood not far away and watched her for a while. Her leg was more crippled than before, once a limp, now a wobble with every step, needing the support of a wall to stay steady. When I got home, my mother-in-law was busy in the kitchen. Seeing me return, she called out, "Nyen Nyen, what did you buy today?" "I bought a fish. We can make soup with it tonight." I carried the groceries into the kitchen, and she took them, rummaging through while muttering, "This fish looks good, fresh. By the way, Nyen Nyen, are you free this afternoon?" "Not really." "Why, then could you pick up Xiaoxiao? She has a follow-up appointment at the hospital today, and I can't get away." I paused for a moment and asked, "For the follow-up?" "Xiaoxiao went to the hospital." "Yeah, she went by herself early this morning, said she didn't need me to go with her." My mother-in-law put the fish into the sink without turning around and said, "That child has grown up, she's sensible now." I didn't say anything, but suspicion began to stir in my heart. Xiaoxiao went to the hospital by herself. In my past life, she was someone who would get out of breath after just a few steps, even if her health has improved a bit in this life. It's not enough for her to go to the hospital alone, is it? When I got home, my mother-in-law was busy in the kitchen. Seeing me return, she called out, "Nyen Nyen, what did you buy today?" "I bought a fish. We'll make soup with it tonight." I carried the groceries into the kitchen, and my mother-in-law took them, rummaging through them while muttering, "This fish is good, fresh. By the way, Nyen Nyen, are you free this afternoon?" "Not really." "Why, then go pick up Xiaoxiao. She went to the hospital for a follow-up today, and I can't get away from here." I paused for a moment and asked, "Follow-up?" "Xiaoxiao went to the hospital." "Yeah, she went by herself early this morning, said she didn't need me to go with her." My mother-in-law put the fish into the sink without turning around and said, "That child has grown up, she's sensible now." I didn't say anything, but suspicion began to stir in my heart. Xiaoxiao went to the hospital by herself. In my past life, she was someone who would get out of breath after just a few steps, even if her health has improved a bit in this life. It's not enough for her to go to the hospital alone, is it? When I got home, Xiaoxiao had already returned and was sitting in the living room watching TV. Seeing me come in, she smiled and said, "Sister-in-law, you're back." "Yeah," I replied, changing my shoes and sitting down next to her. "How was the follow-up today?" "What did the doctor say?" "It was good. He said I'm recovering well," she said, her eyes fixed on the TV, not looking at me. "That's good." I paused for a moment and then asked, "By the way, was anyone following you when you came back?" Her body stiffened briefly before quickly relaxing. "No." "Why do you ask?" "It's nothing. I just thought I saw someone who looked a bit like one of our neighbors back home. I must have been mistaken." She acknowledged with a sound and continued watching TV. I didn't press further, but I made a mental note of it. When I got home, Xiaoxiao had already returned and was sitting in the living room watching TV. Seeing me come in, she smiled and said, "Sis, you're back." I changed my shoes and sat down beside her. "How was your checkup today? What did the doctor say?" "It went well. He said I'm recovering nicely." Her eyes remained fixed on the TV, not looking at me. "That's good." I paused for a moment and then asked, "By the way, was anyone following you when you came back?" Her body stiffened briefly before quickly relaxing. "No." "Why do you ask?" "It's nothing. I just thought I saw someone who looked a bit like one of our neighbors back home. I must have been mistaken." She acknowledged with a sound and continued watching TV. I didn't press further, but I made a mental note of it. That night, I tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. Who was that man in black? What was his connection to Xiaoxiao? Her reaction was clearly off. When I asked if someone was following her, her body stiffened. She knew that person, or at the very least, she knew someone was following her. I quietly got up and opened the door a crack to peek outside. The hallway was pitch black, and I couldn't see anything at first. I squinted, letting my eyes adjust for a while before I could vaguely make out a shadow moving slowly toward the entrance. The shadow was walking slowly, limping. It was Xiaoxiao. Where was she going so late at night? I gently pulled the door open and followed her. She opened the main door, went out, and didn't close it properly, leaving a gap. The next day, Xiaoxiao acted as if nothing had happened, getting up as usual, eating as usual, and watching TV as usual. I didn't mention last night's incident, pretending I knew nothing, but deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. What did Xiaoxiao know? Who was that man in black? How many more things were the mother and son hiding from me? Her figure disappeared into the stairwell, standing in the darkness. I stared at Granny Wang's dilapidated shed, and an indescribable feeling welled up inside me. What had Xiao come to see? To check if Granny Wang was dead, or to see how her medicine ingredient was faring? I slowly walked back, tiptoed into the house, and lay back down on the bed. From next door came the sounds of Xiao moving around. She wasn't asleep either, tossing and turning in bed. I lay there with my eyes open, staring into the darkness until dawn. Today, Mom told me she had a way to save me. She said she'd found a master who could borrow someone else's life for me. I asked her whose life she was borrowing, and she said it was sister-in-law's. Sister-in-law has always been good to me, and I don't want to harm her. Mom said it wasn't really harming her. Sister-in-law is young and healthy, so borrowing a little wouldn't matter. I don't know whether to believe her or not. That afternoon, while Xiao was taking her nap, I sneaked into her room. Her room wasn't big, just a bed, a wardrobe, and a desk. I quietly rummaged through her drawers, under her pillow, and inside her wardrobe. Deep in the wardrobe, I felt something hard, a notebook with a red leather cover, tucked away at the very bottom. I pulled it out and opened it. On the first page, in her handwriting, was a line: "My life was given to me by my mother. Today, Mom told me she had a way to save me. She said she'd found a master who could borrow someone else's life for me." I asked her whose life it was, and she said it was my sister-in-law's. My sister-in-law has always been good to me, and I don't want to harm her. Mom said it wasn't really harming her. My sister-in-law is young and healthy, so borrowing a little wouldn't matter. I don't know whether to believe it or not. Mom brought home a red piece of paper today, saying it had my sister-in-law's birth details written on it. Looking at that paper, my mind was in turmoil. Was my sister-in-law's life really going to become mine? The master came to our house, an old woman. Mom told me not to go out and to stay in my room. I could hear noises from next door, like chanting. I didn't know what it was, and I was terrified. Over the past few days, my health seemed to have actually improved a bit. I could eat again and had some strength. Mom was overjoyed, saying the master's method was working. I didn't know whether to be happy or scared. Last night, I dreamed of an old woman, very, very old, with completely white hair and a limp. She stood by my bed, just staring at me without saying a word. I woke up in a fright. When I woke up, my legs were aching terribly. That old woman came again. She stands by my bed every night, watching me. I don't dare tell Mom. She says I'm making a fuss, but I'm really scared. Who is she? Why is she coming for me? Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind in complete disarray. Xiao wasn't entirely innocent. She knew the truth, yet she chose to remain silent. She had enjoyed the benefits brought by the fake birth chart I wrote, relishing her improving health day by day. Being tormented by Granny Wang's resentment every night was her retribution. But what had Granny Wang done wrong? She knew nothing, did nothing, yet she was used as a medicinal ingredient. Xiao knew. She knew about the old woman's existence, knew she was draining someone else's life. She was afraid, she felt guilty, yet she said nothing, did nothing. She allowed her mother to continue this scheme, allowed my life, no, Granny Wang's life, to slowly flow into her. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my flesh until it hurt. But what could I do? Go tell Granny Wang? Tell her that someone was stealing her life? Run? Where could a 70-year-old woman run to? Report it to the police, say my mother-in-law was using dark arts to steal lives. Would the police believe it? I could do nothing. I could only watch this play unfold bit by bit, watch Granny Wang grow older day by day, watch Xiao recover day by day, watch my mother-in-law's smile grow brighter and brighter. During dinner that evening, Xiao suddenly said, "Mom, I want to go out and work." My mother-in-law was taken aback for a moment, then smiled. Good, good, now that you're better, you should go out more. What kind of work do you want to do? I have a friend who runs a clothing store. She said she'd like me to help out. All right, go ahead, Mom supports you. I kept my head down, eating, but my mind drifted to the line written in the diary. I seemed to see someone standing across the street, watching me. That friend. Was it the man in black? I looked up at Xiao. She was smiling, but her eyes avoided mine, flickering nervously. I lowered my head and continued eating. That meal tasted like nothing to me. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms until it hurt. But what could I do? Go tell Granny Wang. Tell her, someone is stealing your life. Run. She's an old lady in her 70s. Where could she run? go to the police and say my mother-in-law is using dark magic to steal lives, would they believe me? I could do nothing, I could only watch this play unfold bit by bit, watch Granny Wang grow older day by day, watch Xiuxiu get better day by day, watch the smile on my mother-in-law's face grow brighter and brighter. During dinner that evening, Xiuxiu suddenly said, "Mom, I want to go out and work." My mother-in-law was stunned for a moment, then smiled, "Good, good, you're healthy now, you should go out and get some fresh air. What kind of work do you want to do?" "A friend of mine runs a clothing store and said she could use my help." "All right, go ahead. Mom supports you." I kept my head down, eating, but my mind drifted to that line in the diary. I seemed to see someone standing across the street, watching me. That friend, was it the man in black? After Xiuxiu said she wanted to go out and work, the atmosphere at home changed quite a bit. My mother-in-law busied herself every day buying her new clothes, saying she needed to look the part for work. Zhang Jingguo also, for once, showed concern for his sister, asking where her friend's store was and if it was safe. Xiuxiu answered each question, a smile always on her face, but when I looked at that smile, it always seemed a bit forced. That afternoon, I was folding clothes in my room when my mother-in-law knocked and came in. Her face was all smiles, and in her hand was another piece of red paper, exactly like the last one. "Nian Nian, Mom wants to discuss something with you again." Looking at that red paper, my heart sank, but I kept my expression neutral. "Mom, go ahead." She sat down on the edge of my bed, took my hand, her tone unbearably affectionate. "You see, that birth date you wrote last time, Mom placed it before the ancestral tablet and it worked wonders. Our family has been smooth sailing lately. Xiuxiu's health has improved. It must be because your birth date is auspicious, blessed by our ancestors." But then Mom thought about it, and when it comes to offerings, it's best to have a pair. Writing just one is a single number, not complete. It would be best to write another one, to make a pair. That way, the blessings will be even stronger. I took the red paper, lowered my head to look at the blank grids on it, my mind racing. Longevity, there was no such thing in my previous life. Back then, I only wrote it once, and then I grew old day by day. Why do I have to write it a second time in this life? Did the old lady notice something wrong, or did something go wrong on Xiuxiu's side? Whatever it is, I can't just write anything on this paper. I looked up and asked, "Mom, whose birth details should I write?" "Write your mother's," my mother-in-law said with a smile. "Isn't your mother in good health? Longevity, write her birth details to bless the elders in our family." My mother, I clenched the red paper in my hand, my nails almost piercing through it. In my previous life, they used my life, and now in this life, they want to use my mother's life. "All right, Mom, I'll write it, but I need to think about my mother's exact birth time. I don't remember it clearly, so I'll have to ask my dad," my mother-in-law quickly said. "Then hurry up and ask. I need it soon." I nodded and put away the red paper. After that, my mother-in-law left. I thought for a long time and suddenly remembered someone. There's a distant cousin in my hometown who died last year at the age of 67 from an illness. From diagnosis to passing, it only took 3 months. I saw her a few times when I was young, but I don't have much of an impression, only that she was tall and didn't talk much. My mother should know her birth details. I called my mother, chatted about this and that for a while, and finally casually asked about that cousin. My mother sighed and said, "What a pity, such a good person, gone just like that." I asked her about the exact birth time of the cousin. My mother paused and asked why I wanted to know. I said a friend here has the same surname and wants to perform a ritual for a deceased person. Without thinking much, my mother told me the cousin's birth details. After hanging up, I wrote them down, waited a while longer, and then took the red paper to find my mother-in-law. "Mom, I found out my mother's birth details," I said, handing her the red paper with the cousin's name and birth details neatly written on it. My mother-in-law took it, glanced at the paper, and the corners of her mouth lifted again, exactly like last time. She carefully folded the red paper and said, "Good, good, good, I'll offer it right away. Thank you for your hard work. It's no trouble at all, it's what I should do," I replied with a smile, then turned and went back to my room. Over the next few days, I started observing Xiuxiu again. She really did go out to work, leaving early and returning late each day, dressed up nicely with makeup on her face, looking no different from those fashionable girls in the city. But I still noticed something off. Her leg was even more lame than before. In the past, she would only pause slightly when her left foot touched the ground, but now it was obvious when she walked that her left leg couldn't exert any strength, dragging along with each step. She noticed it herself too and started wearing long skirts to cover her legs, but the way she walked couldn't hide it. When she walked faster, the limp became impossible to conceal, and then there were her hands. Once during a meal, I saw her chopsticks tremble in her fingers. Almost dropping onto the table, she quickly tightened her grip on the chopsticks and pretended nothing had happened as she picked up food. But I saw it clearly, her hands were shaking. It wasn't the kind of trembling from nervousness, but the kind that couldn't be controlled. Mother-in-law saw it too, but she didn't say anything. She just kept putting food into Xiuxiu's bowl, saying, eat more, it's good for your health." Zhang Jianguo was still the same as ever, not caring about anything. After eating, he'd just lie on the sofa and scroll through his phone. That night, I heard Xiuxiu go out again. This time, I didn't follow her. I just stood by the window, watching the activity downstairs. After waiting for about half an hour, I saw Xiuxiu slowly walking back. She walked very slowly, limping along. When she reached the building entrance, she suddenly stopped and looked up. I quickly ducked back, hiding behind the curtains. She stared for a long while before finally lowering her head and entering the building. The next day, I went to see Granny Wang. She was sitting at the entrance of her shed, looking even older than she had a few days before. Her hair had turned completely white as snow, and the wrinkles on her face were deep, one after another, deep enough to trap mosquitoes. Her eyes were terribly cloudy, taking a long time to focus when she looked at someone. Her mouth had sunken in, and she must have lost a couple more teeth. It took her a while to recognize me when she saw me. "Oh, it's Zhang's wife." I handed her a bag of steamed buns I was carrying. "Granny Wang, these are for you." She took them with trembling hands, muttering, "Good person, good child, may the Bodhisattva bless you," looking at her dry, swollen knuckles and thick, yellowed nails, exactly like how I looked in my final days in my past life. My heart suddenly ached. I crouched down and asked her, "Granny Wang, how have you been feeling lately?" She shook her head, her words slurred. "Not good, not good. I'm old and useless now. My legs hurt terribly, and I can't sleep at night. I always feel like someone is pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe." My heart skipped a beat. "Someone pressing down on you?" "Yes." Over the next few days, I started observing Xiuxiu again. She really did go out to work, leaving early and returning late each day, dressed up nicely with makeup on her face, looking no different from those fashionable girls in the city. But I still noticed something off. Her leg was even more lame than before. In the past, she would only pause slightly when her left foot touched the ground, but now it was obvious when she walked that her left leg couldn't exert any strength, dragging along with each step. That night, I heard Xiuxiu go out again. This time, I didn't follow her. I just stood by the window, watching the activity downstairs. After waiting for about half an hour, I saw Xiuxiu slowly walking back. She walked very slowly, limping along. When she reached the building entrance, she suddenly stopped and looked up. I quickly ducked back, hiding behind the curtains. She stared for a long while before finally lowering her head and entering the building. Back home, my mother-in-law was cooking, and Xiuxiu hadn't returned yet. I went back to my room, lay on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. What was I doing? Was I seeking revenge or harming others? Granny Wang was innocent. She knew nothing from start to finish, yet she was used as a medicinal catalyst. Now, she was tormented by nightmares every day, her health deteriorating day by day, and she wouldn't live for many more years. Did I do something wrong? But if I hadn't written that fake birth chart, I would be the one being tormented now. I would age day by day, waiting for death just like in my past life, eventually dying alone in that small room, with no one to care or ask about me. And what about Xiuxiu? Xiuxiu knew the truth. Was she visiting Granny Wang every night to confirm that the medicinal catalyst was still alive? Or was she herself being backlashed by this spell, unable to control herself? Xiuxiu went out every night and came here. That young woman was Xiuxiu, but who was the old lady? Was it a side effect of this life-stealing spell, or was it an illusion created after Granny Wang's life force was drained? I didn't know, but I knew things were getting more and more complicated. "Granny Wang, don't be afraid." I held her hand and said, "If you're scared at night, sleep with the lights on." "With the lights on, they won't dare come." She nodded, tears streaming from her cloudy eyes. "Good child, may the Bodhisattva bless you." During dinner that evening, Xiuxiu returned. She was wearing a red dress, heavy makeup, and her lips were as red as blood. As soon as she entered, I noticed a strange smell on her, not perfume, but something else, indescribable. How was work today, Xiuxiu? I asked. She glanced at me with a strange look in her eyes and said, "It was fine, sister-in-law." Then she sat down to eat without saying another word. I noticed her hands were trembling even more than yesterday. She tried to steady her right hand with her left, but she couldn't stop the chopsticks from rattling in her grip. My mother-in-law saw it but pretended not to notice, constantly adding food to Xiuxiu's bowl. Zhang Jingguo kept his head down, eating as if nothing was wrong. After dinner, Xiuxiu said she wanted to go to bed early and went back to her room. My mother-in-law and I cleaned up the dishes. While washing them in the kitchen, my mother-in-law suddenly said, "Nian Nian, what do you think about Xiuxiu lately?" I paused for a moment. "She's doing well, her health has improved, and she's gone back to work." When we were having dinner in the evening, Xiuxiu came back. She was wearing a red dress today, with heavy makeup, and her lips were as red as blood. As soon as she entered the door, I smelled a strange odor on her, not perfume, but something else, hard to describe. "Xiuxiu, how was work today?" I asked. She glanced at me with a strange look in her eyes and said, "It was fine, sister-in-law." Then she sat down to eat without saying another word. When I was going to bed at night, I heard movement again. First, the door to Xiuxiu's room opened, then footsteps headed toward the entrance. I waited for a while, quietly got up, and followed. This time, she didn't go to Granny Wang's place but walked toward the outside of the residential complex. I followed behind, keeping my distance, walking slowly and limping. After about 10 minutes, she entered a 24-hour supermarket. I also went in, pretending to shop. Mother-in-law fell silent for a moment, then said, "Nian Nian, let me tell you something, don't take it to heart. Xiuxiu's illness isn't completely cured yet. The doctor said she still needs to rest and shouldn't overexert herself, but she insists on going out to work. I couldn't stop her. You're her sister-in-law, so keep an eye on her when you can. If anything happens, let me know in time." I sneered inwardly. "Not completely cured, of course, it won't be cured. Her life is borrowed, not her own. How could it ever truly heal?" When I was going to bed at night, I heard movement again. First, the door to Xiuxiu's room opened, then footsteps headed toward the entrance. I waited for a while, quietly got up, and followed. This time, she didn't go to Granny Wang's place but walked toward the outside of the residential complex. I followed behind, keeping my distance, walking slowly and limping. After about 10 minutes, she entered a 24-hour supermarket. I also went in. She wandered around the supermarket without buying anything. Finally, she walked to the fresh produce section and stood there motionless. I hid behind the shelves, secretly watching her. She stood in front of the freezer in the fresh produce section, staring at the items inside. The freezer was filled with various kinds of meat, chicken, duck, fish, and pork, beef, and lamb. She just stared, her eyes fixed, her expression unreadable. It looked like hunger, but also like fear. After standing there for a while, she turned and left. "Sister-in-law, what's wrong?" I asked if she was feeling unwell somewhere. She shook her head, hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. "Sister-in-law, come in, I have a few words to say to you." I went in, and she closed the door, pulling me to sit on the edge of the bed. Her hands were ice-cold and trembling violently. During dinner that evening, Xiuxiu didn't eat much again. She picked at her food a few times and said she was full before returning to her room. My mother-in-law looked at the leftover food in her bowl, sighed, but didn't say anything. After dinner, as I was clearing the dishes, I heard movement from Xiuxiu's room. I put down what I was holding, walked over, and pressed my ear against the door. There was a sound inside, very faint, like crying. I knocked on the door, and Xiuxiu's crying stopped. "Sister-in-law, what's wrong?" I asked if she was feeling unwell somewhere. She shook her head, hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. "Sister-in-law, come in, I have a few words to say to you." I went in, and she closed the door, pulling me to sit on the edge of the bed. Her hands were ice-cold and trembling violently. "Sister-in-law, She opened her mouth, then closed it again, tears streaming down her face. I didn't speak, waiting for her. After a long while, she finally said, "Sister-in-law, I had a nightmare." "What kind of dream?" "I dreamed of an old woman, very old, with completely white hair and a limp. She stood by my bed, staring at me without saying a word. I was scared and wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. She just kept staring, all night long." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with fear. "It's real, she comes every night, standing by my bed, watching me. When I open my eyes, she's there. When I close them, she's still there. I hide under the covers, and she stands outside them. Wherever I go, she follows and watches. She didn't know what else to say, then added, "Sister-in-law, am I going to die? Don't talk nonsense." I took her hand. "You're not going to die, Xiaoxiao," I said, my voice calm. "The dreams you've been having might be because something's weighing on your mind. Is there something you're hiding from your mother?" She flinched, looked up at me, a flicker of panic in her eyes. "No, nothing, really nothing." She lowered her head and fell silent. I stood up and patted her shoulder. "Get some rest, don't overthink it." I walked to the door, then turned back. "By the way, Xiaoxiao, do you know Granny Wang, the old woman who collects scrap downstairs?" She suddenly looked up, her face turning pale. I looked at her and said slowly, "She hasn't been well lately. You should go see her when you have time." With that, I opened the door and left. Back in my own room, I lay on the bed, thinking about Xiaoxiao's reaction just now. She knew Granny Wang. She panicked the moment she heard her name. The next morning, when I got up, I noticed something was off at home. My mother-in-law's door was open, and she wasn't inside. Xiaoxiao's door was also open, and she wasn't there either. Zhang Jingguo had worked overtime the night before and hadn't come back, so I was the only one left in the house. I walked to the living room and saw a note on the coffee table, written in my mother-in-law's handwriting. "Nian Nian, I've taken Xiaoxiao to the temple to pray. We'll be back later. Breakfast is in the pot." Granny Wang was dead. I stood outside the crowd, watching as her body was covered with a white cloth and carried into a van. People around were murmuring, some sighing, some shaking their heads, some saying the old lady was pitiful, having suffered all her life, and that death was a relief for her. No one knew how she had died. No one knew who had stolen her life. I turned and walked toward the building, my steps heavy, as if I were treading on cotton. When I reached the stairwell, I saw my mother-in-law and Xiaoxiao still standing there. Xiaoxiao's face was frighteningly pale, her eyes fixed straight ahead in the direction where Granny Wang had been carried away, her mouth open as if she wanted to say something but couldn't get the words out. My mother-in-law was pulling her, urging her to go upstairs and go home. Even though Xiaoxiao was being dragged step by step up the stairs, her legs were no longer limp. She walked steadily, but there was no color in her face at all. Her lips were white, like a paper doll. I followed them upstairs and into the house. As soon as Xiaoxiao entered, she collapsed onto the sofa, her eyes still vacant, staring motionlessly at the ceiling. My mother-in-law went to pour her a glass of water, but her hands were trembling so badly that she spilled it all over the floor. I sat on a small stool nearby, watching the two of them without saying a word. The room was eerily quiet, with only the ticking of the clock on the wall breaking the silence. After a long while, Xiaoxiao suddenly spoke. Her voice was very soft, as if it had drifted in from somewhere far away. Granny Wang was dead. I stood outside the crowd, watching as her body was covered with a white cloth and carried into a van. People around were murmuring, some sighing, some shaking their heads, some saying the old lady was pitiful, having suffered all her life, and that death was a relief for her. No one knew how she had died. No one knew who had stolen her life. I didn't head toward the market after leaving the house. Instead, I went to the rundown shack behind the neighborhood. No one was at the entrance anymore. Granny Wang's belongings were scattered all over the ground, tattered quilts, broken bowls, and plastic bottles she had collected, a complete mess. A scrap collector was rummaging through them. When she saw me approaching, she glanced up and then continued searching. I stood at the entrance of the shack, looking at the makeshift bed made of wooden planks inside. On the bed lay a worn-out mattress, black and shiny, as if it hadn't been washed in years. On top of the mattress was a pillow, also black, with a dent in the middle from where Granny Wang's head had rested. On the ground beside the bed was something red. I walked over and picked it up. It was a red cloth pouch, exactly like the one I had found earlier in the old woman's room. Inside was another yellow paper folded into a triangle, with cinnabar-drawn talismans on it. In the center of the talismans were a name and a birth date. I stared at the name for a long time. It was Granny Wang's own name, her real name and her real birth date. Who had placed this red cloth pouch here? Was it the old woman's mysterious expert, or was it Xiaoxiao? I put the red cloth pouch in my pocket and turned to head back. When I reached the building entrance, I ran into the man in black again, the one who had been following Xiaoxiao earlier. He was standing at the entrance, looking up. When he saw me approaching, he froze for a moment, then turned and walked away. "Stop!" I shouted. He didn't stop. Instead, he walked even faster. I chased after him, grabbed his sleeve, and he turned around. Under the brim of his hat, his face was revealed, a man in his 30s, fairly ordinary looking, but his eyes were a bit frightening, bloodshot as if he hadn't slept in days. "Who are you? Why are you always following my sister-in-law?" I asked, staring at him. He looked at me, his lips moving slightly. It took him a long time to finally say, "I'm her boyfriend." I was taken aback and let go of his sleeve. He stood there, head lowered, like a child who had done something wrong. "My name is Zhou Qiang. Xiuxiu and I have been together for half a year, but her mother doesn't approve. She says my family is poor and not good enough for theirs. After Xiuxiu got sick, she stopped seeing me much. Recently, she came to me again and said she was scared, asking me to stay with her, so I've been keeping watch nearby every day. Afraid something might happen to her, I put the red cloth bag into my pocket and turned to walk back. When I reached the building entrance, I ran into that man in black again, the one who had been following Xiuxiu earlier. He was standing at the entrance, looking up, and when he saw me approaching, he froze for a moment before turning to leave. "Stop," I called out. He didn't stop. Instead, he walked even faster. I chased after him and grabbed his sleeve. He turned around, and his face was revealed from under the brim of his hat. She looked at me, her lips trembling, and it took her a long time to say a single sentence. "I'm her boyfriend." I was stunned for a moment and let go of her hand. She stood there, head lowered, like a child who had done something wrong. "My name is Zhou Qiang. I've been with Xiuxiu for half a year, but her mother doesn't approve. She says my family is poor and not good enough for theirs. After Xiuxiu got sick, she hardly saw me anymore. Recently, she came to me again and said she was scared." I looked at him, my mind racing. Boyfriend? Xiuxiu has a boyfriend. There was no such person in my past life. In my past life, Xiuxiu had been recuperating at home, never stepping outside, so where did this boyfriend come from? What was she afraid of? Zhou Qiang raised his head, his eyes bloodshot. "She said she has nightmares every night, dreaming of an old woman. She said that old woman was coming to take her away." I asked her what old woman, but she couldn't explain, just said she was very, very old and had a limp. I suggested taking her to the hospital, but she said it was useless, that the hospital couldn't help. I said we could go to the temple to pray, but she said her mother had already taken her, and it didn't work either. My heart sank. "What else did she tell you?" Zhou Qiang hesitated for a moment, lowered his voice, and said, "She said she owed that old woman and had to repay her." I asked her what she owed, but she wouldn't say. She just cried. "The night before last, she came to me and said she might not have long to live, telling me not to wait for her anymore." I scolded her for talking nonsense, but she insisted it was true. She could feel that old woman right beside her, waiting to take her away. His voice trembled as he spoke, his eyes reddening. "Today, I heard that an old woman died downstairs, the lame Granny Wang. I was scared and came to check on Xiuxiu. Is she okay?" I didn't answer him. Instead, I turned and walked back, upstairs. As I pushed open the door, I heard Xiuxiu screaming inside. It wasn't a human sound, more like something was choking her throat, squeezing it out from deep within, sharp and thin, enough to make your skin crawl. Granny was calling her name inside the room, but her calls soon turned into sobs. I rushed over, pushed the door open, and saw Xiuxiu lying on the bed, her body curled up like a shrimp, her hands clutching her head, making that strange noise. Granny knelt by the bed, holding her, tears streaming down her face. "Xiuxiu. Xiuxiu, don't scare your mother." Xiuxiu slowly crouched down, right in front of Granny, and looked at her with those cloudy eyes. "Do you know what I come here to do every night? I come to count the days, to say how many days your daughter has left. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Today, I've finally reached the end." She stretched out her hand, withered joints, swollen fingers, exactly like Granny Wang's, and slowly reached toward Granny's face. Granny let out a sharp scream, her eyes rolled back, and she fainted. Xiuxiu's hand stopped in mid-air, paused for a moment, then slowly withdrew. She turned her head and looked at me. I stood motionless in the doorway, as if rooted to the spot. She stared at me for a long while, then suddenly smiled. This smile was different from before. It carried a trace of life, Xiuxiu's own smile. "Sister-in-law," she spoke, her voice returning to normal. Xiuxiu's voice. "Thank you." I didn't know what to say, so I just looked at her. "Thank you for that birth chart," she said. "That birth chart saved you, and it saved me too." I was stunned for a moment. She slowly stood up, leaning against the wall as she walked step by step back to the bed and sat down. She lowered her head and looked at her hands. Those hands had already changed, becoming as dry, swollen, and wrinkled as Granny Wang's. Xiaoxiu's hand paused in mid-air, lingered for a moment, then slowly withdrew. She turned her head and looked at me. I stood motionless at the doorway, as if nailed to the spot. She stared at me for a long while, then suddenly smiled. This smile was different from before. It carried a hint of life. It was Xiaoxiu's own smile. Sister-in-law, she began, her voice returning to its original tone. Xiaoxiu's voice. Thank you. I didn't know what to say, so I just looked at her. Thank you for that birth chart, she said. That birth chart saved you, and it saved me too. I was stunned for a moment. She slowly stood up, leaning against the wall as she walked step by step back to the bed and sat down. She lowered her head and looked at her hands. Those hands had already changed, becoming as dry, swollen, and wrinkled as Granny Wang's. That so-called master, the one my mother found, was no master at all, she said softly. He was a fraud, preying on people like my mother. He took her money and gave me a talisman, claiming it could trade someone else's life for mine. My mother believed him and gave him your birth chart. But that talisman wasn't for borrowing life, it was for summoning spirits. She looked up at me. When you wrote Granny Wang's birth chart on it, Granny Wang's spirit was summoned. She comes to see me every night, not to harm me, but to keep me company. My heart trembled. To keep her company. She told me that she had a hard life, that her son ignored her, and she lived alone for decades. She said that after she died, no one would collect her body, no one would burn paper offerings for her, no one would remember her. She said I gave her a home, a place for her to stay every night, and she was very content. Xiaoxiu's tears fell, dripping onto those aged hands. Sister-in-law, I know you hate us. My mother harmed you, my brother ignored it, and I said nothing. Our whole family conspired to steal your life. You shouldn't forgive us. I remained silent, saying nothing. But when you wrote that birth chart, were you also gambling? She asked. Gambling that the life-stealing spell would backfire. Gambling that we would face retribution. I looked at her and nodded. She smiled, tears streaming even harder. You won the bet. She reached out, her withered hands grasping mine. Sister-in-law, I don't blame you. I deserved it, but I beg you for one thing. You said my mother. She's not a good person. She's greedy. She harms others. But she's my mother. When she wakes up, don't tell her any of this. Let her think I died of illness. Don't let her know that the master she sought was her own dead son. These words shook me to the core. Looking at her, her eyes grew increasingly clouded, her voice softer and softer. My brother drowned in the river when he was 3 years old. My mother cried for years. Later, she became superstitious, searching everywhere for someone to summon my brother's spirit back. The master she found was the one she herself had summoned. She missed my brother so much, she became obsessed, summoning her own son's spirit without even realizing it. I held her hand, those hands growing colder and stiffer by the moment. Xiaoxiu was dead. She died right before my eyes, on that bed where her mother had exhausted every possible means to keep her alive. By the time my mother-in-law woke up, Xiaoxiu's body had already stiffened. She threw herself over the body, weeping with a heart-wrenching sorrow, crying so hard she nearly lost her breath. When Zhang Jianguo returned and saw that Xiaoxiu was dead, he stood frozen for a long while, said nothing, then turned and walked out. Later, I heard from others that he squatted in the hallway smoking cigarettes all night long. On the evening after the funeral was over, my mother-in-law locked herself in her room and didn't come out for a full day and night. The next morning, when she finally emerged, her hair had turned completely white, and the wrinkles on her face had deepened, layer upon layer, as if she had aged 20 years overnight. She paused when she saw me, her mouth opening as if to say something, then closing again. I didn't speak either. Walking past her into my own room, I began packing my things, clothes, shoes, cosmetics, and even the quilt I had brought from my parents' home when I married, folding each item neatly and placing them into a suitcase. I spoke, my voice calm. Do you know how your sister died? Zhang Jianguo's face changed, but he said nothing. Do you know your mother sought a mystic to extend your sister's life? Still, he remained silent. Do you know that mystic used my birth details in a ritual? He lowered his head, unable to meet my gaze. I smiled, but as I smiled, tears began to fall. You knew everything, you knew it all from the very beginning. You said nothing, did nothing, just waited for your mother to trade your wife's life for your sister's. Now your sister is dead, your mother has lost her mind. and you come asking me why I'm leaving now." He lifted his head as if to say something, but I cut him off. "Don't say anything," I said, picking up my suitcase and walking past him. Our accounts were settled in our past life. In this life, I owe nothing to anyone in your family. I walked to the door, and my mother-in-law stood in the living room watching me. Her hair had turned completely white, the wrinkles on her face deep and shallow, and her eyes were hollow and empty, exactly like the reflection I saw in the mirror when I first woke up reborn. She looked at me, her mouth opening and closing, and it took a long time before she managed to say a word. "Nyen Nyen, Mom was wrong." I looked at her and said, "Nothing, Mom shouldn't have harmed you. Mom just wanted to save Xiaoxiao. Xiaoxiao was Mom's everything." As she spoke, she began to cry, covering her face and crouching down, curling into a ball. "Now Xiaoxiao is gone, and Mom has nothing left." I walked past her with my suitcase in hand. When I reached the door, I stopped, turned back, and looked at this home. On the wall hung the wedding photo of me and Zhang Jianguo. In the photo, I was smiling like a flower, my eyes filled with anticipation for the future. Beside me, Zhang Jianguo, dressed in a black suit, also smiled so naturally, a smile that now felt utterly unfamiliar to me. "Mom," I spoke up, and my mother-in-law looked up at me. "Xiaoxiao, before she died, asked me to tell you something." She froze, tears still hanging on her face. "She said that the master was someone you invited yourself." My mother-in-law's face instantly turned pale. "She asked me to tell you, stop looking. Your son died long ago and won't be coming back." I pulled the door open, walked out, and closed it behind me. A heart-wrenching wail came from inside, exactly like the one when Xiaoxiao died that day. I didn't look back. I went downstairs, left the residential complex, and stood by the roadside, watching the cars and people come and go. The sun was blazing, making it hard to keep my eyes open, but I felt warm all over. A world apart from lying in that little dark room waiting to die in my past life. Carrying my suitcase, I walked a few steps toward the bus stop, then stopped. I turned back to look at the complex, at that building, at that window. Behind that window was the place I had lived for 3 years. In those 3 years, I had laughed, cried, hoped, died, and then I came back. I settled the scores that needed settling, repaid the debts that needed repaying, and now it's time to go. The bus arrived, and I boarded with my suitcase, finding a seat by the window. As the bus started moving, I glanced outside. The neighborhood grew farther and smaller, eventually disappearing from view. I leaned back in my seat, closed my eyes, and the image of Xiaoxiao's face before she died surfaced in my mind. She said, "Sister-in-law, thank you for listening to me. I can finally sleep well tonight. Old Lady Wang must be able to sleep well now too, and so can I." I opened my eyes, watching the streets flash by outside the window, and a slow smile curved my lips. In this lifetime, I can finally live well. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.